Hey guys, I hope you all are staying safe out there. My name is Lindsay and I am going to do a quick tutorial on how to make a mask. With the COVID going around and everybody hunkering in, hopefully doing your part at lowering the curve, our healthcare workers are on the front line. And as a former nurse myself, I felt the need to give something back to them and try and do my best. As I have heard several friends of mine who are nurses are using one mask a day and have to put their mask in a paper bag at the end of their shift and reuse it when they return. So that makes me so sad. So I have sewn in the past. I am not some extraordinary sewer, but I am going to just use the basic essentials that I have had at home. I went on Pinterest and I found a great site. I will be tagging it on this so you can go to that person's site and download the pattern for this particular mask. There are two forms of patterns. There is one that is a double layer of fabric, pretty much mostly for like allergies and that sort of thing. But the one I'm going to focus on today is a pocket mask. And so there's actually 4 layers, 2 in the front, and then you could slide, for healthcare workers, they could slide a mask inside of it. One of my favorites right here, a mustache. So you always gotta make a statement while you're at work, having fun even through these times. But this has a pocket. So I could essentially, if I had a face mask, I could slide it in here, then it's gonna protect the surface of that face mask. So if it does have to be reused, then medical personnel can take this and wash it and reuse their mask and reuse this. A little bit more safer and cleaner than a brown paper bag. It's better than nothing, right? So I have seen many things out there stating that it's, I don't know the exact name, but it's a non-woven material that you can put in here that catches gross things. So it's not going into your lungs. Really cool. This pattern, you can see here, I've already cut these out, but there's a men's. There is a young children, oops, sorry, let's go. Men's, teenagers and women. Young kids, 7 to 12, and a small kid, 3 to 6. It gives you 2 different patterns. One is for an outer layer and one is for the actual pocket itself. So if you do print these up, be sure to print both of them because you do need both of them. A couple different things too that I did on here. The fabric that you want to use for the outside of your mask is really like your quilting cotton. And if you want to be really on top of it, pre-wash it. So if you are making these for donational for hospitals that you don't make them and then they go home and wash it and they shrink. So if you can pre-wash it, awesome. Couple different things you might have laying around your house, because I have a very small amount of elastic. So I made this one, and this has elastic on it. So essentially it would go around my ears. And it's comfy. For smaller kids, if you don't have elastic hanging around your house, you could use rubber bands. They are the same concept. So they're gonna go on your child and hook around their ears. So I could only make probably about 3 masks with the elastic that I had on hand. So the other ones I'm gonna be using rubber bands, but I have tons of ribbon. So if you have tons of ribbon sitting around and you don't know what to do with it, use it for this. So this one here, I threaded ribbon through it so then it can actually tie. So that's what I will be doing today. And I just threw a cute little stitch on here to hold it in place. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so for this one, I am going to do a young kids, 7 to 12. When I printed this up, If you print it up on PDF form, it is going to be the proper size measurement. So it has a little 2-inch line on it to make sure that you do have it in the proper size. You're supposed to cut along the red edge, which I did. I did not cut along this red edge because as I was doing my first one, I noticed that it only gave me a really small area to work with. And because I'm putting ribbon in it, I kind of wanted a bigger pocket for the ribbon to go through, so it's a lot easier to put through. So the way that it is printed up on the page, this is the edge of my paper. So I just cut across, and I'm giving myself a much bigger distance here, so I have a lot more workable space to make a little pocket for my ribbon. So with your fabric right side down, these are just scraps. These are not pre-cut. This is cut from an old project I had. But with the fabric right side down, notice that this says main fabric. Okay, just so you see again, main fabric, lining fabric. So I'm going to take my main fabric and I'm going to make 2 cutouts with it. On the written tutorial on Pinterest, it says to pin it and use that copy paper and all that stuff. I guess I would say I'm a cheater sewer. I look for the easy way out. So I'm just using a marker. I'm gonna flip it over, make my second trace. If you are planning on making a bunch of these, which I am, and I have, I would suggest getting a piece of cardboard and tracing this out and cutting it, or even a piece of cardstock. So when you are tracing it, it's not as flimsy. So, okay, so I have my main fabric. I'm gonna scoot that over. So now I am going to do the lining fabric. So I am going to, again, place it right side down, right side facing down. Get my lining fabric pocket piece. Okay, so now that we have our 2 pieces, 4 pieces total, outer and inner, I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting. This is something that you can have your kids, since they're home with you. If you've got kids, they can help you cut out and be a part of something of giving back. Okay, so now that I have my outer pieces and my inner pieces, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna sew the curve of both sets. So I'm gonna put the 2 correct sides together like this. Just gonna pin it in place, nothing fancy. I'm gonna repeat it and do the same with my outer edge, my outer fabric. Okay, so now that I have my front and inner pieces put together, I am going to sew a stitch along the curve only. When I do this, it says on the directions a 3/8 of an inch for your line. It has you doing dotted lines and all this stuff. Again, I am a cut my corners through sewing, so I'm not doing that. I am lining it up to the edge of my foot of my sewing machine. When you go through this, I'm not back stitching on this part yet. If you are watching this wondering why I did not do that, it's okay. Once we fold everything together, everything will lock in nicely. So just going through those stitches. All right, just cutting off the excess string there, taking out my pen, and now I'm going to sew the curve of my inner fabric. Again, not having to back stitch, having I don't know if you can see, I'm going to turn this really quick. Just lining up the edge of the fabric with the outer edge of the presser foot. Okay, snip these ends off. And take off the pins. Okay, next thing that you want to do, you want to grab your scissors and you want to cut not all the way to your thread, obviously, because if you cut through your thread, you will be ruining what you just sewed. So cutting about every 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever you feel. The purpose of this is so when you turn it in right side out, you don't have the tension on the curve of your mask. I'm going to do that with both pieces. Okay, so when I open this up, I have what looks to be a mask. So what I want to do now is we're going to go, while you're sewing, you can have an iron on, and we're now going to go and just press this over to one side, and then we're going to do a quick stitch. Come on. Okay, so I got my awesome setup here on my center island, and I do not own an ironing board. Again, I simplify things. So, anyways, I got a towel down here to protect my granite. I'm gonna have this right side out, but I'm going to be sewing the inside of this. Okay, we're gonna push down one of our sides, or I'm sorry, the little seam that we just sewed. So now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and do the rest of our stitches. All right, so now that I had ironed the seam to one side, I'm going to put it right side out, or wrong, whatever, reverse side. And I want to throw a stitch. It's hard to see on this material because it's so dark, but you see my seam right here. I just want to throw a little stitch really close to that seam. Again, not having to backstitch and all that stuff. Okay, so you see I threw that stitch in. It'll be much easier to see. Actually, never mind. It'll be much easier to see on the pink one when we do that. Let's do the pink one. Okay, see, this one is much easier to see. So I just have a little bit of a stitch here. What it's doing on the opposite side is it's just holding this over. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna close off the edge of our pocket. So we're gonna go back to the iron. So I have my inner pocket. This is very important. You wanna make sure you're using your inner pocket material. I'm going to fold the raw edge over about 1/4 inch. Iron it down. The purpose of this is I'm creating a nice clean closed seam for my pocket. I'm going to fold it over about 1/4 inch again. So I have a nice finished edge. And then I'll throw a stitch in it. I'm going to flip it over and repeat the same process over on the other side. Okay, I'm going to go back to the sewing machine now and just throw a little stitch in. All right, so now that I ironed this edge, I'm going to throw a little stitch in it. That just goes along the edge here. Now this one, you can do a locked seam. The reason I do the lock seam on that is really for the purpose of if you are putting a mask in there, feeding a filter through, it's going to get a lot of tugging going on. Okay, we're going to do our other side. And so now we have a finished edge. Okay, so now I'm going to get my main fabric again. I'm going to lay it down right side up. I'm going to take my inner pocket inside out so I have right sides together. I'm going to line up my little seam that I created and line up the curve. I'm going to put a pin in it to hold it securely. I'm going to do it to both sides. So what you're looking at is something like this. So now I'm going to throw a stitch in it, again lining it up with my presser foot along the top and along the bottom. When I do that, that is when you want to back stitch it in place. One thing, if you don't sew that much, when you come to the edge, because it is a point, so you don't lose track of your stitch, I'm going to go up to that point. I'm going to stop and I'm going to manually wheel my needle down into my fabric so I can lift my presser foot up. You can see the space here, but it's still not going to lose the space of where my stitch is going. So then I can take my mask and I can rotate it so I can follow down the curve on the other side. Throw another back stitch in it. Now, no, I'm not going all the way around because I need to leave this open for my pocket. So I take that off. Cut my string. And I'm going to repeat that same stitch along the bottom. Again, making sure you back stitch. I make my back stitch a little bit longer than most, really for the philosophy of this pocket's going to get tugged on a lot. Cut my extra off. Now I can remove the pins. And I'm going to take my mask and I'm going to pull it right side out. Remember, this one looks pretty small because it is a kid's. Now that I have it right side out, I'm going to take it back to the iron and flatten out my seams. And we're almost done. Okay, so I'm going to kind of manipulate the fabric with my fingers to just spread apart that seam a little bit so I can iron it down. I can fold it in half now. It's starting to take its shape. I'm just gonna iron the front of it, make it look nice and pretty. And now we have our mask. So we have our inner pocket. Now the last part we need to do is just do our little tunnel, if you will, to be able to weave our ribbon through. So I'm going to iron this down a little bit. Helps hold the fabric in place again, so you don't have to like pen as much. You will notice how this kind of goes in a little bit. That's okay because you have the tapering of the fabric here. It's naturally going to do that. I'm going to fix this one a little bit. Okay. So now that I have that, just like we did the little fold over with our inner pocket, I'm going to do the same thing here, although I'm not going to sew it quite yet. So I'm going to fold it over about 1/4 inch, iron it down, repeat over on the other side. And here's where the magic happens. I'm going to take this, I'm creating the little tunnel for my ribbon to go in. So I'm going to fold this all the way to this edge. And I'm going to iron it down. Again, fold the second side all the way to your edge. Okay, now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and throw a stitch in this. We're almost done. Okay, so now that I had ironed those over, I'm going to throw a seam right along the edge. Do a double stitch on this or a locking stitch. Lock it. And repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to cut off these little frays that are poking out. Okay, so I have my mask. Now we're going to go and put the ribbon in. Okay, so for the ribbon, when you're going to put that in, the things that you'll need, a paper clip makes your life so much easier when you're threading it through. A lighter if you have it. If you don't have a lighter, you can use your stove. If you are a child and you are doing this, please be sure that you have a parent helping you with this anytime you are using fire. The purpose I am using this is to close the edge of my fabric. I know there's a product out there that you can put on. It's like a liquid seam, I believe it is. I can't remember. I am all out. I do not have any. So I'm improvising with what I have because I am not going outside. So before I start, I'm just going to do my first edge. Just going to do a little bit of fire and it just shrinks. It doesn't make it black or anything. I like using the end of this and I just push it down so it makes it flat. So now you have an edge that's not going to be fraying, which is helpful. Okay, so I am going to take my paper clip. I'm just going to loop this through a little bit. Take my mask and I'm just going to feed the paper clip through and pull it out, and that's magical. You want to think about, okay, if you're tying this around your head, you have to have enough ribbon to be able to tie it in a bow. So I am going to have my daughter, since this is a kid's size mask, I'm going to have my daughter come and help me so I can measure it on her head. Okay, so I got my daughter, my beautiful daughter, and my beautiful mask. I'm going to put it on her. If you can hold it on with your hands. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to take this ribbon and have it come. I'm going to turn her a little bit to the middle of her head. And my question to myself is, do I have enough string to be able to do a bow? Yes, I do. I'm going to do the same here because this is going to be tied around her neck. So I'm going to make it about this long. Okay, I'm going to cut it. Thank you, darling. And then I'm going to just simply take this ribbon, line it up. I'm not measuring it out. Everybody's head sizes are different, so I'm not even going to give you a specific measurement. I know on the written tutorial on Pinterest, it said 6 to 8 inches of elastic. When I did that for my husband, that was not enough. So you got to do what's best for you. All right, so you can stay there because I'm going to have you model for me.
Okay.
All right, so I have one of my melted edges. I'm going to go ahead and do the same. With that side. Okay, don't worry if it like comes off a little bit. Not comes off, but if it like melts away a little bit, it's fine. Just cut that little excess off because you also don't want it scratching anybody. I'm going to do this for my second ribbon. I'm going to grab my paper clip, put my other ribbon through it. Feed it through, and voila. I have my mask. So now what I'm going to do is, because these are you could just essentially slide it through and through when you're tying, which would be a really big pain. So I am going to take her, if you're doing these for donational purposes, I would just say have half and half on either side. Because I am being a stickler and I have my daughter with me, I'm going to put it on her again. I'm going to have you stand right here. So now with my daughter right here, I'm going to put this on her face. I'm going to have you kind of hold it, give a little bit of tension over where the ribbon is so I don't just pull it all the way through. I'm going to grab my lower ones and tie it in a bow. Okay?
Nice.
All right, now stand up. You can turn around and you can see. So I have it's tied here. I have it tied under her hair. The nice thing with this is it does fit nice and snug right up here, so you're not pulling air through. And it also goes underneath the chin nicely, so you also don't have opening pockets for air to go through that way. Okay, so now that I have kind of the dimension for her head, I'm gonna just throw a little stitch right here, so then when it comes time to putting it on, it's not such an issue of the ribbon going in and out. Okay, I'm gonna do a lock stitch on this one, obviously again for all the tugging. I'm just going right in the center, so no crazy rule. And I lock stitched on the entire little stitch that I did. So when I pull this, it's not going to pull the ribbon through. Okay, and I'm going to throw a stitch on my second side. So now I have both my ribbons in. So when you do put it on and you have to tie it, it's not wobbling everywhere and it's much easier to manage. So now we have our mask. So if you have, some people do have the non-woven fabric at home. So I just did a mock fabric. Okay, so this is, believe it or not, this is a quilted material, non-woven material from puppy pads. We have a puppy, and I have a gigantic thing of Costco puppy pads. So I peeled it off, cut it. It's not used, so don't think it's disgusting. And you simply just put it in. And then you have your filter. So that's the same concept with the masks for the nurses and doctors, medical staff, I will say, because there's a lot more than doctors and nurses. And they can just slide their mask in there. The thing too, if you're making this for medical staff, you can or don't have to put the strings on, because essentially if they're using their mask, then it will already have the strings. But in the event that they don't have them, it might just be nice to throw them on there anyways. So I'm gonna finalize it by putting it on my daughter's face one more time. Final project. So this, you can see already, she doesn't have to hold on to it, because it's going to be in place. So much easier. It's easier with her hair in a ponytail too. Good? Awesome. Okay, so recapping, going back to these, the different things. It is super simple. If you just have spare fabric laying around your house, you don't need pins. All you really need is a sewing machine, scissors, and an iron, and ribbon and fabric. So what I showed you guys is the one with the ribbon. And then we have this one that has elastic, so it goes, I think I had put it on earlier for you. It just goes around your ears. And then we have this one, if you don't have elastic or ribbons and you have hair bands, you can use that as well. So I just want to show you guys without sewing it on. Remember when we did on this one, we went and ironed this tunnel. That's what I'm going to call it. So I'm so technical. So we ironed this tunnel, right? You would do the same thing on this one. You iron the tunnel, and then I sewed the tunnel as well, and I did a loop of elastic that's probably about 8 inches long, and then I tied it in a knot. Once it was in a knot, I just shoved the knot through my little tunnel so you don't see it. So you can do it that way. With the only difference when you use a rubber band is you're still going to iron your little tunnel, but then before you throw that last stitch in, you have to set your rubber band inside. So you have your fabric, pretend this is my ironed fabric, and I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm going to then I'm going to put a stitch in my tunnel to complete it. Okay, so those are your different options that you can use: the rubber band, elastic, or ribbon to make these work for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's not too complicated. Again, I am not some master seamstress. I am a quick throw a stitch in it and go kind of person. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. I want to just send love to all of you guys and pray for protection over your families and blessings. Just know that this too shall pass. Also, shout out to my son, Gavin Dolan, for doing this video for me. He is an incredible video editor. At 14 years old, I'm amazed at what he does. So I am going to be putting this on his YouTube channel because I am not a YouTube person. So you can subscribe and watch him in all his amazingness that he does. He's a pretty gifted kid, and I'm really proud of him. So thank you for watching. We're also going to put the link to the Pinterest account that has the patterns for what I showed you guys. Her name is Craft Passion, I believe it is. So I'm going to give her all the kudos for that. And if she wants to use this video on her Pinterest as assistance for tutorial, that is absolutely fine, because we're all in this together. So thanks, God bless, be safe. Can I put that in? Maybe.